Excellent. Hi, hello, everyone. Sorry about that few minutes kind of getting my audio sorted out. For some reason, it's probably the heat. Here in UK, we're having a little bit of a heat wave, which is super fun. Um, if you like fans and computers and rendering and UV bake and all that. But yeah, thank you all for coming to this second session of VRM Power. So I see there's quite a few people who are here in the last one, which is super cool. I'm just gonna introduce myself quickly. Hi, my name is Augie. I'm an animator, designer, virtual creator, world builder, etc. And we are doing this 6-week workshop on exploring creations of VRMs for Mona, Metasphere, Metaverse, and beyond as the world kind of keeps moving that way. So the first session, in case you've missed it, has been recorded and it's been posted up. So I think we got posted up on Friday. So we'll aim to get these to you on Monoverse's YouTube channel before the weekend, so people can catch up, have a chance to kind of like go over some details before each session and the like. And that's been live. And the first one was basically just an overview of looking into the overview of creation of what we can create a VRM, how fast we can do it, and to demystify some of the kind of issues, because when to get everyone basically on the same page, as we kind of create these VRMs, we're all kind of coming from different backgrounds and stuff, and I know for myself when I kind of jumped in, it kind of felt really daunting. It's like, oh, it's going to be really difficult to kind of learn, and there are some finicky parts. I'm not going to lie in there, but the overall creation of VRM is fairly straightforward, as I think we demonstrated last week. So you can go from zero to having a workable model in probably under an hour, which is always nice. And then hopefully we can explore future things in that way. So today we're going to dive into the main element of it. So let me just do a quick screen share. Put a boom, just so we have some visuals for the convos. Cool. Uh, and just to get the right thing over here. And yeah. Oh, gone. Here we go. No. Huh. Sorry about that. I've lost the stage. Here we are. Cool. For the recording, anyways. So it's quick overview of VRM Power. This is kind of what we worked through last, kind of just overview of everything we're going to do in this kind of 6-week session. And we are with humanoid. So all of the VRMs, they have to be a humanoid model. They're basically like meshes which are attached to an armature, which is humanoid. And it's the closest approximation of us in the metasphere. I know, like some people, myself included, are wondering whether we can have like four-legged characters. Unfortunately, there's some workarounds, but not directly. To have like an IK kinetic full integration is a bit more challenging. So we're kind of like stuck with this humanoid basis, which is quite broad, really. There's a lot of variation we can do within it. So everything kind of starts with a humanoid, and because everything starts with a humanoid shape, we can make quite a variety of things based on that. But we have to make it fairly small, so it's optimized for WebGL and beyond, and and we have to kind of try and put some variety in there as well. So it's going to be clean, optimized, but also playing with that limited palette, we can do quite a bit. So think about silhouettes, how things are connected together, etc. One good thing, I mean, we can even go to like full cyborg shape or like skeleton wise. So one good thing about the humanoid kind of model is once we kind of get our bearings about it and we kind of know what we're doing and everything else, then we can adapt to make a variety of other kind of characters based on that initial model. I mean, that's what I did in my collection. So we can kind of create one thing, and then out of that, we could have dozen or many, many more, which means we're looking at how we can multiply these things. Think of it as being a base, and if the base is solid, if the foundation is solid that we're building on, then our overall building will be solid as well. So if we build on a strong foundation, we can build everything else. So as we're creating these humanoid forms, we really have to think about the optimization in the design stage, rather than kind of coming importing everything into a blender or whichever thing you want to use, and then adjusting all the vertices and stuff like that. We can get a lot of that done as we're kind of creating the mesh. Wherever you're creating the mesh, there's a lot of design keys you can do to simplify your life later on. And also kind of thinking about the humanoid model, really have to like consider like the back of these models, as whenever we're basically driving these models in third person rather than like first person, kind of we see the back of them. So I always kind of felt that the back of the model is of the VRM is really important because it's our first optical association with that model. So it allows us to kind of link with it much further on, unless we go to first person, in which case it's what other people see. So we go beyond flex. We go into the space of cohabiting a liminal digital space with another creature which we probably created, which is kind of a really cool concept. And yeah, like there's many of these things, and the scale is to be pretty wild. Cool. Also, kind of just wondering, did anyone kind of work on anything since the last session? If anyone has anything to share and stuff like that, this is a really good time for it. Or if there's any kind of questions from before, once you had a look at the recording and anything's kind of confusing and stuff like that. As I said before, like always, feel free to interrupt me at any time, but I will make like these kind of little spaces that you can literally say anything now that you want. Cool. I've got Crypto Spectre doing ferocious typing here. All right. So like I've got Crypto Sector talking about the textures and the Unity stage. So at this point, I would probably say we are going to be working on textures, if I'm correct, next week, uh, which is beats for the deets. So the textures we're going to go really in depth on the textures. So if there's anything that's kind of like you're stuck on that, next week we're literally kind of going over that with a big comb and kind of looking at all the various kind of problems that we can encounter and stuff like that. In the initial one, I just wanted to kind of cover what we can achieve with the textures like fairly quickly. But then we're going to really look at how everything goes today. And Crypto Spectre, like he sculpted a dude in Blender like earlier today. So yeah, that's super awesome. I saw it up on Twitter. Also, if you want to share these things, feel free to like at me on Twitter or anywhere else, or DM me at any time, and I'll kind of have a check on it and stuff like that. And if you, hopefully, we'll get to the stage that everyone will create some VRMs, even if they're broken. It'll be kind of quite fun for us to all kind of give them a driving test and troubleshoot them together, basically, and kind of see how they kind of all work well. But yeah, the textures in the Unity stage, it's so we'll cover it in full kind of length, but it's basically creating a material and then adding a material, adding the UV that we baked on top of it. That's kind of the basic stuff. But we're going to go into a lot more detail in that soonish on. Sweet. Awesome. Does anyone have anything else? Yeah, awesome. Happy days. Like, let's get on. Sweet. Cool. So we're gonna be jumping into VR because it's a really hot day where I am, and I've got many fans around me. So I thought I'll bake my head. Oh wait a second. We've got something else in the. Oh, sweet. Oh, look at that! Like, if you guys looked in the chat, there's a really cool little dude in the in in there. That's awesome, Spectre. That's really cool. I wonder what, like, I would say, like, whenever we're doing these things, if you put the statistics on, uh, then we can see the what the mesh details and stuff like that, so that we can immediately kind of help out if it's the mesh is like large or small or anything like that. But it looks like it'll be really simple to optimize as well. Oh wow! Oh sweet! TM Voice has done something as well. That's awesome. That's sweet. I like the texturization. That'd be like a really sweet UV bake. You may lose some of the details of the face because we're going to go to 1024. But yeah, that's awesome. Oh man, I love to see these. This is, yeah. I just need to give you guys some love. That's it's amazing stuff. Woo, let's go. And yeah, hopefully we'll get some of these VRMs into monospaces and do some runnings and stuff like that, which would be super awesome. Kind of gonna start doing that. And I've just noticed like there's a little tip that I was working on, and both of these models that you guys made will benefit directly from it. Yeah, it's to do with like rigging and making the stuff. So without further ado, I'm just gonna have a little sip of super cold iced coffee because caffeine and all that stuff. And let us share the cool space. And hopefully this will work out. And I'm just going to stop my recording. So as before, when I'm in VR, I can't see the screen. So feel free to interrupt me vocally. Just shout. If there's any questions and stuff like that, and I'll try and pick it up as fast as I can. Boom. And oh, VR is hot today. Oops. Get the right hands on. Always helps. Sweet. So, let's say right hands. And attachments. And I'm in. Dived in. It's virtual reality. The future. Or the future now as we're in. Sweet. So, last week we did this little dude. Oh, by the way, just want to check. Can you see okay everything? Oh.
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Oh, wait a second. Oh man, I just crashed myself out. Oh no, I'm back in. Sweet. Okay, cool. Excellent. Fantastic. And we're back in again. Cool, there's just my cable which is loose. So last week we did squiggles. You remember the whole buffer kind of theory? And that's that little dude there. Woohoo! So, humanoid after all. That will be the instructions. Duplicate that, take that off. Sweet. So basically, we have a humanoid model that we're going to start everything from that point. They can vary a lot. It's like a humanoid, so it's got to be bipedal. It's got to have legs. It's got to have arms. It's got to have a head, a torso. So you can go fairly kind of complex and make something like that. So you can kind of explore all of those things, and we can kind of work around the musculature of things. But this model is heavily meshed. So even though it's fairly optimized and it's kind of done to kind of follow the musculature, it's still too much. So we can kind of check that. It's 578,000 polys, which is, yeah, that's too much for us. We can't do that.
Okay, is that the mesh we're seeing straight off your drawing natively out of Quill? So you just turn on the mesh and that's what it looks like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it without, and that's it with. So it's a really useful tool, especially if we're like explaining something. So, I can kind of grab it here and I can literally take it. You can see how the mesh warps and changes and stuff. So yeah, it's really useful for when you're creating things or when we're talking to other people about it, because it's fairly intuitive, and we can kind of cruise around it. So that's like a humanoid object, but that's like super heavy when it comes to the meshing stuff. So we're aiming to get something like much, much, much more simpler than that. But still, we want to resemble that humanoid, maybe not as buff. We can have thin humans or anything like that. But having that kind of like digital anatomy, digital autonomy. We listen too much AI these days. Digital anatomy can be a super useful tool, whether it's like a skeleton or something which is like fully musculature and stuff like that. Because once we have it, you can take muscles or whatever, you can make it smaller, bigger, and everything else. So that allows it in whatever program you're in, like scaling and sizing and tapering is fairly straightforward. So let me just take Mr. Lowen out, and let's go for yes. So we're basically having kind of like a simplified humanoid model. Like this is kind of like my initial design for Karabos. So instead of having super high kind of complex stuff, once I turn this off, it looks fairly nice and neat. But when I turn this on, you can see how vastly simpler the shapes are. Kind of really talking about kind of just following the musculature curvatures, following the overall line and motion of the shape in order to kind of achieve a semblance of a humanoid. And once we have that, then we can quite easily start to kind of manipulate it out. So I mean, Quill is the place where I really like to kind of play with, because it's super comfortable and it's fast because it's VR, so it's fast to kind of show rather than turning around many times in the Blender when I'm doing any modeling in there. So let me just run this through quickly to the loom. So when we're building a humanoid, uh, this is like anatomy 101, right? Let me just go for something a bit more. There we go. So classical human is 5 heads, heroic human is 7 heads, super heroic human is like 9 heads. So that's kind of like the usual stuff. So you can like overlay yourself. Just open up a file, boom, boom, and call it humanoid after all. We're going to make a half. Hopefully, when we half done. So you can kind of think like, okay, that's going to be like just get a circle. So if that's a head, and just going 1, 2, go. So getting like 5 heads is like your average kind of normal human, more or less. And if you're going to add another head, we're going to like that more kind of heroic, kind of breaking out from the normal human world. I mean, these people exist, like Maasai people and stuff like that. They're like, as well as people who are actually much shorter. You actually have like variation in humans who are around 4. And obviously, dwarfism means that people even smaller than that. So, there are varieties, and these are just averages. But we can have that. So that's your head, and that will be a kind of area where your shoulder is going to be. And you have it around there. So basically, you have like your arms, it's going to come down here, and your legs are going to start around this point and going to go down. Cool. So that's one way of kind of measuring stuff out. What I also like to do is, which is kind of really useful, especially when you create stuff in VR, is there's nothing wrong with like referencing anatomy. So if I put a boom, cruise it there, always good to kind of see some musculature and stuff like that. So you can kind of just see the connections, remind yourself of this. I kind of find it a really good practice to kind of try and do a full, just like a drawing, whether it's in VR or in IRL, of human anatomy every year. It just helps kind of reinforce that within, but it is always useful to kind of have a little peek as you kind of go in. So whether it's a male or a female, there are some drastic differences in the way the musculature is kind of composed, especially around mid to lower abdomen and around the back. Like here, there's a lot more. Here's a lot less because of the whole hip ratio. While the arms and the legs are very, very similar. So, we could make something following the musculature tone. Just so get like a fat brush. Yes, it is. So, like, let's say that's our little kind of shoulder tricep thing. So we can just make something like that. Down there, put a roof, create that. So, we can kind of like almost formulate it like that, kind of going by the muscle for each thing. And then, you can think like, well, they're going to have a tricep. So, put a room. So if you notice, I'm kind of like taking these fairly straight and then manipulating them rather than kind of drawing them out. Oops. Which would be a much more expressive and flowy thing. However, there's a difference to that. So you can see like how it meshes. There's a lot more of them and they become a lot more kind of like crunched up. So almost at the design stage, you're thinking of big shapes like so. And then when we have the big shape, we start to kind of think how these shapes can kind of integrate together. So, we can select on as a tricep, and we can move it around and kind of get it all nice and neat. Do a little bit of tapering on one side, do the tapering on the other side, kind of create a lattice and kind of get it all there, and boom, and then just kind of join it up. So that's kind of how that would work. Effectively. And then we can continue building upon that. However, you'll notice it's a lot of polys. So even if we're to kind of optimize this, and this isn't just a quill thing, this is a anything thing. So let's go for optimization. And we're getting like all these kind of much flatter nodes and stuff like that. So kind of thinking, okay, this is great, but yet we have all of these things. And here we can see that's it's already 2.3 thousand. It's a lot. Obviously, this is unoptimized. So let's, for the sake of doing everything, let's just optimize the whole thing. So it's like 1.3. Like, we can go up to 20. So that's not a place to play. So, when we're thinking about designing humanoid shapes, we've got to always kind of play around whether it's better to kind of approximate and do something which is more symbolic, or whether we can go more for accuracy and trying to mimic something that's realistic. This kind of stuff is really, I find like really nice working on the back. So, as I mentioned before, regarding the kind of the whole back muscle and stuff like that, we see our characters in the back. We can take that. It's got a similar shape. Take it there, and then, oopsie daisy, whack it in that, boom, stretch it a little bit there, and I've got, that's going to be like the back, right? Because one thing that's kind of cool about that is then I can take, let's just copy that thing, go on here. So you can kind of create like almost like a lattice-like shape out of these things, which can be reactive. So once it's rigged and weight painted, you will get kind of a feeling that it's almost like the musculature is animated in a kind of like very smart way, whilst retaining your polys, So that's possibly like one way of kind of doing it, kind of like getting that in there. However, what we said about the arms here, let's simplify it. This is like what Spectre did in a way. So we have a couple of, we're looking at this simplifying the whole body shape. So what do we have? We have like a blob, a longer blob, a long line with a little blob there, and then a hand there. We'll get into hands in a little bit. And over here, we've got like a flat, and then kind of like a bunch of stuff. We can just assume this is a one thing, and this is also one thing as well. So that kind of helps in kind of simplifying things as if we're drawing something. And then we can start adding like a lot more details when it comes to UVs and material. So let me just get some differentiations here. So we can just go boom. Okay, cool. So that's my little blobby thingy stuff. And actually just so we can build it properly. So if I go up, cruise down, reduce that. Sweet. Cruise in. And do some stretching and start some tapering off. So we're getting like that kind of shoulder kind of feel already. Obviously, it's super big, so we're going to reduce it a bit, and then thinking about the positioning and how he's going to integrate with the whole thing. So that's kind of heading there. And then like the nice thing you can kind of almost do when doing these is you can kind of like make a boom, make a smaller one. I want to keep my geometry really low. And that'll be my kind of like a tricep thingy. But obviously like the hand has like a bit of a curve in the middle of it, like a little bump there and stuff. So, you know, rather than sculpting it exactly, which you can do, but you're not going to get the right desired effect, you can kind of like, you know, cheat a bit by bending it into shape. And then in Blender, we can like correct all these vertices a bit more to kind of tuck them in, basically. So it kind of feels a bit more like a holistic thing. And then let's add the forearm. So put a boom. Let's go. There we go. Swap it around. Sweet. So kind of keeping those polys on the low side. Because, you know, we can always do more polys, but if we keep them as low as possible at the start, it just ensures that basically they're kind of working. And yet again, just going to manipulate the lines a bit to kind of give us a semblance of an overall shape. To kind of, because the way our eyes see things is we see by impression of stuff as opposed to direct representation of the world. You know, it's like most of the colors that we see don't exist, like oranges and stuff like that. Like they're not really there, mathematically, anyways. But our minds interpret. Same with foveation. We only see very little of the world, but our minds make up for the rest of it. So we can kind of use that. It's a unique form. Let's just get his muscles a little bit smaller. There we go. Taking it up there, and then large it down there, and then boom. Cool. And then we have like, that's basically an overall super simple shape. So let me just take that off. And so when it comes to the back, I'm gonna like do a combination. So I'm gonna just add like a little bit of lattice and another like lattice on the side. So kind of just keeping it yet again super simple and fairly fast. So, you know, if you have a lot more time, you can kind of start properly playing around with these things. And let me just optimize that so I can play around with the optimized model. And also kind of thinking about how it's going to work with the rest of it, where it's going to work and stuff like that. So here, like I may want to take that arm and readjust. Not a beautiful thing about doing anything in digital is you don't need a rubber. You have Control Z, you can move things around and everything else. Like if you ever done any kind of like real life sculpture, it's it's much less forgiving, which is always neat. So we have that, and then we're gonna go to some like traps over there. Let's raise that head up. Boom. Shake it in. That's our head space, and there's gonna be a neck space right there. Bam. So yeah, we're kind of thinking about how to kind of interlock all of that stuff together to kind of create an impression of a humanoid. So you know, we've got an arm there ish. We've got like some stuff happening there. That's all nice and solid. And kind of let's get the front on. So the front is basically panel, and for the sake of speed, you could either work the middle area like a one side, or it can be one half, one half. So we'll just do the halvesies, right? That makes it a little bit easier. So we're just gonna go bam, bam. That's a chest, right? More or less. So you're always kind of thinking of these kind of big shapes. And that's the same thing when you're modeling in VR, like here in Quill or Gravity Sketch or Blender or ZBrush. Like it's a very similar kind of thing. It's like when you're making stuff in clay, you're putting like basically big shapes of putty and add them on. It's just here you're kind of thinking of shapes that tell as much as possible about the character without overdoing it. And that kind of like always works. So let me just bend it a little bit, get optimized. Sweet. So that's down there. Happy days. And that obviously joins in and we're winning. Then there's certain things which kind of we all notice which kind of add more to the character. So like for example, collarbone. Collarbone just means like there's a chest there, it starts there. So we can like add these kind of things all the way throughout our design process, which are like fairly simple, fairly rudimentary, but I do add that little extra thing. I mean, I quite like doing a lot of stuff on the neck muscles because of the style, it kind of accentuates the head and stuff like that. But there's no right or wrong at all here. You kind of you're basically creating a humanoid shape that you can follow through. But you know, once you have a standard shape, you can do quite a lot with it. So the collarbone does that, and then I can just pinch that. Sweet. For some reason, if you stop breathing, it works faster. I'm just gonna like add a little bit of bulking on that side. Sweet. And then cool. So we're getting all of that together. So right now, like and also don't be afraid to like take some guide elements out. So right now I'm gonna take this out because I'm finding it's obfuscating my vision of the character. And I have that, and let's add like a nice little a big taper. So you know you can go as simple as like we did with the scribble last week. It's like boom, boom, you know, that's the torso, and that's done. But it is useful to kind of have different guides for different things at different times. So we're going to just keep it as a guide, and we'll build out the rest of the structure there. So let's go. If you think about like stomach muscles, both in men and women, like we have those kind of big, kind of it's kind of arch really. So we kind of want to recreate that, but for the speed's sake, rather than having one line, I'm just going to have a line on each side. Like that. And that's going to be fairly bendy, so I'm just going to take that, bend it a little bit, shaboom, schmack, maybe a bit more. Down, and that's better. Boom, and back on, sweet. So I got that, and and that'll be our big arch right there. Let's thicken it up. Thicken up here, show there, and we can just kind of force it into shape. So it's kind of just make like a putty man basically. Getting like all of that around. And then we'll add some obliques. And then some back stuff, and we're basically done with the top, which is super fast. So obliques will go like boom, boom. And I'm gonna do the edge. Also every program has its own kind of a different idiosyncrasies. Like Quill has usually one big fat edge and one thin edge, which is just like the way it is. But it means you can play with it for the design elements as well. So we're gonna add those obliques there.
Sorry to interrupt,
Go.
Oggy. But it looks another good thing about Quill is it looks like all of these marks are kind of all of these shapes are sort of based on an icosphere.
Yes.
So it has kind of longitude and latitude lines, and also these triangulated ones. So when you decimate it, sort of shrink the geometry down.
Which is that optimization, basically. Yeah.
It helps. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does help.
I think mine in Blender was a mess earlier because I wasn't using those shapes.
Well, that's something like in the kind of design stage, if we're thinking about that, I mean, Quill is good to explain that as well. But we can think about it in anything else we're using. So if you think about the full geometry as you're kind of creating things, we can kind of tell how many items we have to tell that story here to tell that that line is going across there, and that's kind of like moving in a kind of inlay over there. And if we had less, we couldn't tell that story. And if we had more, like we may tell that story with more detail. But with the whole kind of WebGL, like the details is is a place we don't have much space to kind of work with. So that would be my obliques there. But yeah, it's a great point. And let's just, so for these, like before I've made characters which all interlock lattices and stuff like that. But, you know, number one, it'll take far too long. And number two, it'll cost far too much in the data. So we're just going to put like a big chunk. So, you know, also because of these models, VRMs, that part is largely going to be underneath the arm. The arm is going to be lower down. So it's quite easy to kind of over-design as well, because quite often as we're kind of designing stuff and doing like in T-pose, we kind of forget about all these other kind of things. And we go, oh, that's really cool, add some more detail in there. But that detail may be unnecessary because we're just not going to see it. So we can kind of think of like adding detail maybe somewhere else, maybe adding like an accessory to the character, which will give it much more kind of like detail stuff than something else. Make sure I optimize this. Otherwise, I'm going to have with a messy geo, and I can just interlink down there. I'm just going to join it in, and boom. Happy days. Cool. And like with anything else, you can always kind of grab things, tucker, sweep, all that, smash to get it into anything that we need to get it so it can kind of work. So it's always going to help, isn't it? Right? Hello? Oh, is someone asking anything? Oh, right. Oh, maybe I was just hearing things.
Might just be a hot mic.
Hello?
I think it might just be a hot mic.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So we got that. And then let's just go for the neck. So we just got to keep neck super simple. And make the smallest little thing I can. That's too much. There we go. So you can almost like, one thing that I like doing quite often is I like making like all these like super easy primitives. So maybe I'll make like a few of them. And then if you're doing a lot of kind of work, make one which is super tapered at one end, make one which is like straight. So you have them kind of like lying around. So when you're coming to things, you're not always drawing stuff from the scratch, you're not always modeling stuff from the scratch. You have like an approximation, so you can kind of pick it up. So the more you do, the faster you get at doing it as well, which always going to find like a very useful thing. So I'll just wrap it over there. We're going to just kind of bend it in basically. Sweet. And that's kind of, and we have like that little kind of nape at the back of it. So one good thing about humanoid models is we all have one. We inhibit one, unless some of you are AI, in which case you're not going to say it, are you? But because we all have the same frame, effectively, the basis of it, more or less, we can always double check how things fit in. So, you know, when it comes to like neck, that obviously isn't how it works. You have like a spine which goes in there, and you have like neck muscles which come in here as per right there. But we're trying to kind of give the semblance of something rather than the actual real representation of that. So it's almost like thinking, because we have such a restriction on polys, we always kind of thinking of what we can add, what we can sacrifice, how we can kind of like work together to kind of add more or less, and what is worth our poly time, or should we spend that space into somewhere else? So it's kind of like it's always like a challenge, like a puzzle that you're trying to kind of fit into this low poly environment. Oh, that's not too much. Whilst kind of being fairly playful with it all. So right, okay, so we've got something happening there, and let's just get like a bunch of the little 50, 100 packs that everyone has, right? Boom. No, that's too big. So let's go for the smallest. And down. Gouge that in. Cool. I'm just gonna poly that up. One thing is all of these programs need much more sound effects, so it's fine. And just do that in, the sides, wrap around. That's it. And I'll be approximately there. So, we could do like all of them. We can just stick like a few of them and then laugh off the rest because it's enough to kind of tell the story. And that it's all about telling the story of the character. Why are we making the character? What's the point of it? Does it exist somewhere else? Does it exist in metaverse? Does it exist in metasphere? Is it a human despite being a humanoid? Is it a machine? Is it a robot? And then we can explore everything else throughout it. And as always, kind of just checking the character, moving it around, reimagining things, adding it on, and let me just add a little bit of neckage, just for fun. Right? So, so I'm gonna spend some of my data points in the neck because kind of I dig it. You may not. So kind of like getting a little bit more detail in there. So you're kind of always thinking where you can add more, where you can take less. And that's like a big part of designing humanoids. The thing is like once you have one or a bunch, then you can kind of like really start playing around with things and taking stuff, adding stuff more to it, stuff like that. Like, oh, I'm gonna add another one here. Actually, that'll be ideal. Just gonna take that and add it there, and just stretch it out, into that, shrink it down, into that neck. So we got a thickness straight into the back of the head. Sweet. Cool. And I think like some legs always help. So, maybe you forgot leg day. So we're just this only kidding. So it's the same kind of principle I was going to find out with legs as used as with arms. They're limbs. So we want to save our polys. And also kind of in saving our polys, like the more polys, the easier it is to weight paint. So you're always going to bear in mind for that. But for example, this region here, that's not going to bend here, right? Like that's your ulna kind of bone, so that's not going to be bending. So you can save those polys fairly easily. Same here, that's not going to be bending, so that's going to be a straight line. Like with torso, all of that is going to be bending and moving around. Same like with the backs, neck is going to be bending and stuff like that. So having like some more polys does help a little bit there as well when it comes to weight painting. But for the straights, you can be fairly minimalistic. I mean, I'll probably do with a few less polys on the shoulder as a kind of consequence. So let us just let us add a bit of oomph, a lagunio. But it's a big kind of muscle thing. So do the reduction and sweet. So I'm feeling I'm working this one a little bit more heroic stage. That feels all right. So do the room, and there we go. That'll be our T-pose leg, and we can just take that and give him like properly hugest calves anyone can have. We can just shrink it down, shrink that down, get it moved around, and same as again, like we're gonna use the shape to kind of accentuate and give us kind of a cheat basically. So we're using the geometry we have to tell as much as we can. Yeah, that's gonna kind of help measure me. So that can go a bit forward. His legs are. We don't have to worry about too much. We put like a joint in there. That can go back. That'll be like the buttocks right there. And can close back in. And we've got a little bit of loose geo there, so might as well use it rather than lose it, right? Right, cool. So we're getting something to just readjust that. Go over there. Sweet. So that's kind of like the basics, and there'll be like another just a fill. So that'll be going like that, which is kind of just where the obliques are. So that we can raise that up a bit. Go like here. Sweet. Doodle-doo. Then those can go lower, and I'm just gonna fill them in, and then just tuck them in a bit. So it's kind of fairly simple at this stage. I'm just gonna make sure my geo isn't warped too much. I'll just move it around a little bit. So let me just readjust that. So we kind of like basically the crux of it. We're making like small geo things at all times. We're thinking about each thing as a separate brush stroke, and which helps a lot. So as you go from the side of it, it's looking a bit too chunky and realistic. So just like tuck them in a little bit there, tuck them in a little bit there. Sweet. Right, cool. Now, where we spend most of our data is in hands. Or if you are like me and like to do all the toes and leg structures as I did for my metadromoid, it was a part of the design choice. They have the same amount as the hands because why make stuff easy when you can make it really hard for yourself? But it's a design choice, so it tells that initial kind of thing within it, which is always kind of thing to consider. So there's a little cheat that I've kind of discovered that helps a ton when it comes to hands. Number one, you only need to do a few sets, and you can reuse them, and you can adjust them and everything else. And number two, when it comes to rigging them, you'll find that sometimes you'll get like really weird things from Mixamo or from other kind of places, and I mean, especially from other places. And they'll just kind of mess up your rig on your hand. And it just takes so long to readjust everything, and it's like a really huge time sink. So I ended up doing this for a cheat, but it took me a few of them to kind of check it out. So I grabbed the standard avatar from Mixamo. So that's literally the standard Mixamo model there. And that's the basis for all the riggings in Mixamo. So we have it right there, which is super nice. And I was like, okay, well, that's a hand. So if I make sure I position, see like all these ball joints and all of these joints there, that's where the rigging takes place. So that's your hip, that's the BAM, useful as construction tools, right, as well. Bam, bam, bam. That's where the movements when rigs. So if we know where they are, we can build with that in mind, right? Bam, bam, bam. Some of these, it's all right if it's like moves there, we can adjust these. We don't really adjust the hands, so if we can get them fairly precise, then we can easily adjust the mesh and everything else with like long fingers in Blender, as opposed to like having to fix the geo and hand individually kind of weight paint each of these things, which is an absolute nightmare if you ever had to do it. So I have a bunch of assets that I kind of build. And some of these assets are hands. Bam. Many hands, claws, all the other parts. So for example, like I built this hand to mimic this. So that's like I'm gonna cheat, you'll grab this and then you'll build your hand to kind of mimic that. And then when you need a hand, you'll just reuse the hand. But it just means your rig is going to be really nice and clean. So you're not going to be messing around with all of that. So where you're spending a lot of data when it comes to your hands, you're not going to be sacrificing that data, i.e. it won't be just for aesthetic purposes. And as we're kind of getting more emotes and stuff like that in these worlds, the hands will be more useful if you're doing other things as well, as opposed to just big shovels at the end of the limbs. So that kind of comes super useful. So I'm just gonna like literally nab that hand there and stick it on here. So yeah, it's almost like a blue Peter. Here's one I built earlier. But it really does help. It does help when it comes to rigging. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same spot there, but all the bones inside of it, it'll basically recognize that because it'll naturally rig it towards that end. So it just means that if you're building like a lot of VRMs, it really speeds that process up, which is super nice. Kind of all works. And I could say like we could do the same thing with feet, but let's do super simple feet instead, rather than anything complex. So, let me just grabbing my foot. Nope. Grabbing my foot here. Just gonna stretch it off. Swap it around. And it goes up there. So it's going for the simples. There's a little bit of toe or march. I'm gonna whack a heel in there. And that heel, actually let's go for smaller geo, bigger geo. Cool. So that'll be my heel. And I'm gonna just let it form that back tendon as well at the same time. And I can just manage to kind of crash myself out almost. Sweet as. I'm gonna just fold it in. Here, that'll do it. Bada boom, bada bing. Healing time. Everyone likes a good heal, right? And let me just grab some ankylenials. The smaller pump, smaller pump. And actually bigger. Just reduce that. That's it. And let's move up in there. So given more time, would make a nicer foot. But try to basically just make a functional one at this point in time. So it's like I kind of went full on making a complex feet with lots of details for my family of characters for the genera of it. But for purposes of here, it's actually bothering me a little bit, so just restructure that one a bit. So we go that, cool. Go here, blend it in, and it's better. Go up. Sweet. And you're in. Yeah, that's a little bit more utilitarian. We use that to accentuate the top part. Although we pretend he had a nasty accident with street straightener. Okay, that happens. Cool. Okay. So yeah, basically we've got a humanoid model there, pretty much. Like it's only one-sided, but like many things are, it's all good. And I'll just raise it up. So we can just, I mean, like I know that in some programs you have automatic mirroring, which kind of helps. In this one you don't have automatic, but you can just copy and flip. So it does basically the same thing. So I'm just gonna grab all that, and then we can see all the mistakes we've made. Sometimes it's useful to kind of just flip like you do with illustration throughout your process. So I'm just going to duplicate that. Oh no, wait. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to copy a new layer. Make sure I've got everything. Sweet. So copy to new layer, take that on, flip, sweet, and I can start tucking both in a bit now, right? So it's a wide boy. But I can kind of get it a little bit more in there. Get a little bit more in there. And then start adjusting things so that I can actually kind of work in a better way. So I'm just going to tuck that properly in there. That can go in like that. They can actually go lower. And, oops, lazy. That arch is always very difficult for that. So arch like this. Cool. I'm gonna start another one there. Rock it up. Actually, let me just get this in higher. Get it on there. Snap dragging that in. Cool. So looking good up there. Those legs are very puny, so just flush them out a bit. That isn't lower down. So we're just kind of trying to kind of basically get our humanoid shape out there. I'm just gonna take this, go for full optimization there, which will help. I'm just gonna go a little bit up. Cool. You know, it's not rather than just having like a circle, it's more useful to have, you know, our heads are a bit more overly, they've got a little more detail on them. Just gonna helps to give some character already, yeah, to what we're creating. There we go. Almost something like this. So that's basically our base humanoid in a kind of a little bit other way, but you kind of get a point of the creation of it. And oh, here we need some spinicles as well. So we'll take that center thing off and add spine. I'm just gonna go boom. Just go super in. Whack, 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 whack. Just putting those vertebrae, you know, the ones where it always gets painful. But as with, oops, daisy, too much. It's better. Maybe I can just adjust these, move around a little bit. So we're always looking at storytelling. What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to say with all of this? You know, does he have a crooked spine? Why does he have a crooked spine? What's the point of this VRM, etc., etc. Yeah, here we go. So that's it's kind of like an Android. Just get the top a bit down. He's had too many summer beers. Sweet. So that's basically, I'm just going to make sure I save. With any program, make sure you save frequently. But yeah, that hand thing, that really helps when it comes to rigging and everything else. So kind of creating like a much more easily adjustable character. And also you can see like when you double them up and do the mirroring, you can see like some things do need adjusting rather than being initially, because our eyes fool us, you know. Like, with everything we do, I bet that should be more like that. That's Go over there. And I can spend like eternity doing this now, but yeah. Doodle-doo. Sweet.
Okay.
It's just about getting to the point of functionality. So yeah, there's more that can be done around the crutch area as well and stuff like that, but maybe like some, so this is just like, you really had skipped this leg day. Sweet. And just gonna save that. So that's like building a humanoid in a kind of super fast way. Obviously you can spend a lot more time on it, and it is kind of quite fun to kind of think, but it's that puzzle. You're always kind of trying to see what you can get away with, how little you can design it, where you can spend your design points effectively because you have limited amounts. You know, also like don't be afraid of going off and not being super symmetrical because no one is super symmetrical, and that adds more to the verisimilitude, more to the believability of a character, and you got it straight in there.
Okay, did you mention last week about the sort of roughly the maximum amount of design points that you should spend, or like how many vertices you should have in a mesh?
Yes. Yeah. So in Quill, it's quite nice because it counts triangles just like Blender. So here it'll give me, whoop, that's my little number there. So I'm pretty sure I'm on 10,000 actually. I think, let me just put everything on one layer. So it's 20,000. You can go bigger than that, but what do we call this fella? Like Doff? Or human after all? It's Huff, right? So you can go, oh gosh, Huff 3. So you can go larger than that, but you are effectively causing clogging issues when it comes to WebGL. So if you can have like 5, maybe 10 characters, which are like much larger, but if you have 100, it's gonna crash. It's gonna crash the space you're in. It's gonna be difficult. It's gonna take longer for it to read materials. Like the more data there is, it's gonna read data. It's gonna read the materials on top of it. So here we're gonna really try to kind of keep everything. So see, I was right at 9.6K. So that's all of that, including the hands. So it gives us like basically another 10K to play around with any details we want. So you can kind of like here create a vocabulary, a visual vocabulary of information. So all of the drones, the dromons for the Metrodromoi, they kind of have these pressure valves and energy pulses and everything else. So each one of them has those things. So made them and then basically added them onto the characters as time to explain more. So that's the kind of those are the kind of limits that we're looking at. So that's and as Matt Empire asked me to make sure I mentioned to everyone, like, yeah, it's really useful to kind of keep that at 20. And as we kind of start going larger, things start to be harder. It's just harder to have like big events with anything. And there's nothing cooler than having like a bunch of cool avatars in an event space, and you can kind of all kind of cruise around with it and kind of see what it kind of works together in that kind of way. So in our little runs in a little bit, we're going to be running with some more complex avatars, which are fully musculatured and stuff like that, with full kind of ladder shaped around there and stuff. But you'll see that they should work all right with the small number we have. But if you had 20 people doing it, like it wouldn't work. It would freeze. So that's the one thing. Cool. So one thing I really want to kind of talk about as well, that kind of leads us to, right, cool. Must have just let me just make sure I haven't messed up. Go here, squeeze it down, 10.2 even. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you quickly just talk a bit about, you mentioned adding components or elements, say, around the neck where there's a lot of movement on the shoulder. Are you
Uh-huh.
literally just adding extra shapes to create more geometry, or what are you actually doing?
Yes. Yeah. So for example, like around the neck here, I've got a great example for this. Cyber bits, aspect bits, mimics. Sweet, yeah. So for example, here, I've got a ton of cables to mimic the neck muscles. So because they have all this geometry kind of stuff, it does mean that when the head moves, so when it'll move, that'll kind of follow. And that's going to give us more information when it comes to our eyes, that when we're observing the VRM in Metasphere. So the less information there is, the simpler the movement will be. And because we have so much movement in the neck area, you can go up, down, left, right, and everything else, as opposed to like the movements in these joints is fairly limited. It can go bam, 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 bam. It's rotationary, but it's not fully. Oops, but the movement for these things, they're all kind of stretch over because of the vertebrae, and they all kind of like move around. Like so, you can push it all the way to like an owl head by adding more detail. But I find that it really helps. I mean, you can keep it really simple. It's more of a design choice than anything else. So you can like just keep it like bam, one line there, and they'll still tell a story. And you can spend like those basically design points on a head to have like a more complex head, or you can have like a huge collar, so it doesn't matter. Like you're not going to see it. So these are all kind of design choices. It's just like when it comes to like purely humanoid shapes, I like to create a humanoid shape, and then I like to add and or take away from it. So yeah, does it help?
Yeah, that does. So, and currently in Mona, I mean, the head wouldn't really move on an avatar as there's no tracking, right? Or
Uh,
if there's an automatic, yeah.
I mean, it does move. So any of the mocap movement that's in there, like running, walking cycle and stuff like that, everything is in motion. So the head is
Right.
moving around. Um,
Yeah.
so it is moving. Like if you hit any of the dance moves, you'll definitely see it. You know what I mean? And I find it very useful to kind of hit through those dance moves when we're troubleshooting, uh, as that will be doing like towards the end, and we can kind of see how those things kind of come together. Um, but let me just come to this part. Sweet. So hopefully it kind of helped out a bit. Like, but here we've got like literally big complex neck, bunch of stuff in motion. Really simple neck, but a big collar around it, big head. Literally what I was saying. So you're kind of thinking of where you're going to add more, we're going to take less. Here it's just literally like it's as simple as it kind of gets. Like one line, and I have some spares, so I added like these two extras in, but almost like nothing there because all the motion is in the head itself. Like that's almost invisible because it's so wide and flat. It kind of covers that thing, and it's in the darkness effectively from every light. So like here, lots of geometry, kind of throat in addition, and then like geometry there because I want it to be like super powerful, like from the back end, like basically like a grill-like structure. But this brings me to the silhouettes. So when we think about humanoids, like we kind of built a fairly standard humanoid, and here's a little variety. These are like metatron, and you can see like they're all fairly different. They're kind of like different sizes, different builds, different things. And if we do this little trick, so I'm just going to grab them all, just duplicate them to the top, back it down there, turn that off. Oops, that's not what I want to do. So I'm just going to duplicate it here. And then I'm going to grab all of these, and I'm just going to like basically color them dark so you can just see the silhouette. Nope, full on. And it's going to get bright. Sweet. So, as I said, I'm going to put these to the side. So thinking about like the silhouettes as well, like each character should be, when we create them, ideally, we should be able to tell them from the silhouette. The worlds are really varied and places we kind of put them all in. So it's like standard character design. Like you want each character to be recognizable as much as possible just from a silhouette. If you see that, you kind of know that's that dude. You see this, it's Karkanos. Like the other one, like it's Bebelos. Like there's certain kind of like additions and also the differences from the other ones that kind of allow us to kind of see them. And also from the back. So kind of bearing in mind whenever we create, I find it really useful to create everything in one color, as you saw beforehand, because I'm thinking about a kind of silhouette as well. And then you can start adjusting things, you can really see what's kind of going on. And then because you're looking at it from that kind of silhouette perspective, you're not looking at any meshes, stuff like that, just looking at the overall kind of shape of things. It means that you can see there's no point adding a lot of stuff to the neck here. It's not very prominent. There's much more stuff going on in other places, just in the design of the character without any details. And same here, like, the head covers most of the neck. The neck isn't featured in the silhouette at all. Whilst here, the neck is a huge element of the silhouette. It's very prominent. And the same thing with all the other parts. So you can see what you want to achieve. Do you want to have character be like stocky-like, with kind of like gracefulness at the bottom? Do you want it to be kind of fairly kind of standardized almost, with an additions and details? Do you want it to be like super bulked up, or a very light figure, or something like quite just kind of drastic, like breaking out from the humanoid mold more, almost looking at, it's like a big egg shape, really, with like two little things coming out on each side, because he's a swimmer. So like those silhouette kind of things, they really help us in design things. And also, let's bring these guys back. Yes. And also thinking about when we have our humanoid shapes, it does allow us to make a lot more things with it, a lot more VRMs. So having that kind of base structure, and these are kind of good examples because I've kept the colorization uniformed. You can see that the base structure is just like moved around a little bit. Some things are more prominent, like he's more muscular, he's less muscular, thinner legs, larger legs, bigger forearms, all those little things which add to it. But you can create like a full family of characters, a full genera, a full species that can inhabit it. And I mean, like, these are fairly kind of heroic looking, but they can be stickmen basically. They can be anything. They can be super tiny little guys as well. Now, I think Spectre mentioned this about scales. So you can make them really, really small. They don't have to be that scale in the monospheres at all, or the other metaverse, and that kind of can pass through. And I'm sure, like you saw VRMs, which are like really small in that kind of end. So yeah, it's kind of useful to kind of create a language, a visual language of elements that you will kind of have if you're creating a family. I mean, like in a kind of genealogical way. So with these guys, they've got visual languages in the lines. So they've got like a bunch of these little kind of fin-like things, a bunch of these circular vent-like pressure points, and they all have toes. So they're like running barefoot effectively in the metasphere. So those are the design elements that kind of carry through the entire thing, and then you push each one forward. So she's a runner, so she's got a big fin, she's got all that behind. Like he's more of an acrobat, so he's got a bunch of these there. So you're kind of like pushing each element forward, but you're kind of creating this language of design elements that you have, and you'll kind of like have them all floating around. So I'll show you. So in the same way that I have those assets, you'll have, breaking out, so like a bunch of assets that you can make like a larger arm with, and then you can like reconstruct that again. So it's kind of creating a bunch of primitives and then adjusting those primitives to the way that you want them, and then making them all nice and optimized, which will then allow you to create complex characters without always having to look at over your shoulder, how much stuff do I have? when it comes to the data points, because it can start become like a very choky in a way. So yeah, which is like I think that's a super important thing about that kind of part. So I think that's it for the VR. I just want to show you something else quickly about adjusting these in the Blender. So just bear with me. I'm just gonna make sure I save everything. And look at that black gold. So good. And let me just change the recording quickly. Okay, we're gonna go to Blender. Oh, I noticed some messages. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Vector, for like explaining stuff while I was in there. Yeah, it's all being recorded, so you can go through it in absolute like your pleasure and leisure. Because I know for myself as well, sometimes it's hard to pay super attention to everything, especially with these live streams and stuff like that. There's so much going on, and some things are some things you really know as well, which is what feels like it's teaching us how to suck eggs. Nothing really does, but yeah, and some things you're like, oh, what did you say? Like this is so confusing. So it's useful to kind of go over it. But let us jump into Blender. So I'm just gonna share, change windows, go live. Sweet. So this is one that we made earlier. And let me just take that one off. And we're gonna go to, nope, that's too complex. Yeah, that's it. And let me just, should I just go to, this will be the best. So you can make a bunch of stuff, but I just go for the S model before redefine. I'm just going to take all these off. There we go. Cool. So like this is one I made earlier, but one before anything really happened apart from general rig. So I kind of just wanted to touch on some of the optimization cleanup effects. So let me just change those preferences. I think it's like was it 1.5? Is that all right? Can you guys see okay the text and stuff? Hopefully, right? Excellent, great, sweet as. And cool. Oh, about Crypto Spectre, like thanks for popping in and contributing. It's so cool. So basically, if we go to this thing here, we get our mesh. So you can see that this is fairly clean. But as I was mentioning before, like I like to tidy some things up. So for example, like those shoulders, we don't really have muscles right here at the bottom. And they will flatten out with weight painting, but we can add a little bit more in. So I'll take that. Let me just close that off. I'll press Tab, which will bring me to the edit mode. Cool. So I'm in the edit mode. I always find it useful when you're doing anything in Blender and you're editing something, just press A, just to make sure you're collecting everything. Otherwise it becomes difficult. So I'm gonna click off that, and we have these little vertices. So I'm just gonna take this little vertices and this little vertices. So just these little two, and grab my little move button. I'm just gonna tidy it up. So this is, smart optimization. So you can literally tidy things up to get them like more in line in a way that you can when you come into the Blender, which is very useful for things. If your geometry is a bit messy in some places, I think like this one's messy and I'm not tidying up. Yeah, it is. So this was like super messy that I made initially. I have to make stuff, but you can kind of start tidying things up and moving around like that. That doesn't need to be as messy as it is there. So you can like almost check on your structures and seeing what's needed, what isn't. And you can kind of like basically pull vertices out. So if something's there, it should like tell you a story effectively. So you kind of cruise there and see how things kind of change around and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of thing I really kind of wanted to mention. That, because like that's, you can see that's a big difference. If I go here, that looks much more natural, and that's like a very kind of almost blob. So between those things, like tidying up vertices really does help, and it's a part of optimization. So it almost kind of means that if something doesn't turn out right in the modeling stage, wherever you're doing the modeling, you can kind of like readjust it and kind of jump in, especially if you have small amount of vertices, in your decimation and everything else, you can kind of you start adjusting, or you can start playing around with it. You can be like, actually, let's go. Like, I don't want this hood at all. I'm going to take the hood off, and I'm going to take this, and I'm going to go here, and I want to create a new shape. So you can literally kind of, change it to be like more like a dolphin. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you can do within it, and I think we're closing in on time, which always happens when we have a lot of fun. So yeah, we'll have to add some more cowbells, definitely. Thanks. So let's do like a quick little mono run. Just want to show this character off in that case. So that's the kind of like more kind of lettuce-like musculature where it's kind of fully built in a kind of abstract way and stuff. But you can kind of see, this is kind of what I was talking about before. So this character is really heavy. Like it's got like, pretty much every sinew that's kind of built into it. But he is very heavy, but he's kind of fairly well kind of animated, fairly well rigged. Everything's all like fairly well together. But this is before I knew that hack with the hands. So the hands are a bit, they've got a bit of a claw hand kind of happening there. But a lot of times when we're kind of troubleshooting these humanoid things, it's super useful just to like do a quick dance. And he's just going to do a quick dance on his own because there's no one here. It's just me. And but at least we've got to like check it out. So you can kind of see how different things are being affected in that way, and where the things would have to be reconstituted, weight painted, where the little faults are, and what kind of works really well, and where you can kind of get away with more detail and stuff like that. So I mean, that's kind of like what I want to kind of like showcase basically in that way. So that's like the extreme of it, and then basically shrinking that down as much as possible, so we can kind of create something that's optimized, designed, and doing something cool. And then I will get the model that we've built today like ready and rigged. So we'll do like a metaverse run for it next week. And if anyone wants to kind of basically make anything themselves, hopefully Mona will be up soonish, and then yeah, we can all have like a together kind of proper run through the meta spaces with all these humanoids, and that will be fairly kind of cool stuff. And then next week, if I'm correct, we are in beats for the deets. So we're going to be jumping into the whole, UV. The Spectre was asking about earlier. So it'll be like UV, bakes, how to make these things look good. A ton of troubleshooting and knowing things that kind of happen to all of us, and we're going to try to get the UVs to work, and how to kind of combine all of the meshes to kind of work together. Check you later, Chu. So yeah, time to sign off, and thank you very much for coming. We went like a few minutes over today, but yeah, we're pretty much still on the time. And yeah, I say thank you so much for coming. Like, I hope it was enjoyable for everyone, and I hope like Mona will start working for you guys. Like, it does seem like it's localized server issue rather than anything else, so that's probably a good thing rather than a Mona issue. So yeah, like fingers crossed, and all the best. Have a lovely day, and check you all soon.